Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So I thought about a question that a lot of people have asked me, especially in the last, 7 or 8 years, something like that. The question is, how do you manage to compete at international level or at a high level as you get older? That's a great question, and it's a very open-ended question because there's a lot of variables and factors involved. I suppose the biggest difference is whether or not you're professional, semi-professional, sponsored full-time, amateur, recreational, that sort of thing. Now, I guess if you're watching this video, you probably fall into one of those categories in whatever sport you do. Probably Wushu, if you're one of my Wushu acquaintances from over the years. It might even be one of you guys or girls that have actually asked me that question yourself as well. And I mean, I'm 42 years old. I've just turned 42 in September. And I mean, anybody could do Wushu at any age, 50, 60 years old if you wanted to, 70. But the level at which you do that particular sport or that discipline, there is an age factor involved. Of course there is, because naturally as we get older, things get harder, our bodies recover slower, and our performance generally tends to decline with age. However, a lot of those things can be offset and circumnavigated in the sense that you can still achieve very, very good results in your sport without necessarily having to do things the way you used to do them when you were younger, or certainly how people who are younger than you now do them. I would say from experience over the years, I've had to change a lot of things about the way I train, my lifestyle in particular, what I eat, how I recover, and my goals as well, both intrinsic and extrinsic goals. Certainly, like most people when I was younger, in my teens and then in my 20s, physicality wasn't a problem. You know, I could roll out of bed, bang out a full routine, no problems. Barely even needed a warm-up. Injuries were few and far between, and if I did, I recovered very, very quickly. Diet really wasn't, I didn't pay much attention to diet in my teenage years or in my early to mid-20s. My metabolism was so crazy I could literally consume anything and I'd be fine. In fact, I did consume a lot of rubbish and I was still absolutely fine. Fitness was always high. My body's response to training was always very, very quick. I adapted very quickly to conditioning, to all sorts of things. So, and for a long time, I was actually a full-time athlete as well. So from my late teens, I think I was probably about 17 or 18, up until my early 20s, I was a sponsored full-time athlete. So that gave me a bit of a leg up, really, a bit of a foundation in terms of training and conditioning and get my body ready for the future of Wushu. I didn't have so much lifestyle issues to worry about at the time. Even though sponsorship money wasn't a lot, it was enough to live off in order to train. You know, no luxuries, no car, no house, nothing like that. But I would say if you're a professional athlete or you're a full-time athlete, your lifespan as a athlete, especially an international level athlete, is considerably shorter. And it's simply because you reach your peak very quickly in the grand scheme of things. And then you can only hold that peak for a certain amount of time or years before your body then decides it's had enough. Or more particularly, your mind decides that you've had enough. I think as a professional athlete, you're doing your sport, your discipline day in, day out. You're doing it because it's your job. you may even be paid for your performance results. And that's a lot of pressure. And for most of us, whether we're amateur or professional, we get to the point where we meet a partner. We maybe want to get settled down, or get married, or have children, or get a mortgage, get a dog or a cat. And, life happens. A lot of people want to have careers and earn money and all of that sort of stuff. So life happens to all of us, amateur or professional. And I think that happens probably to professionals more easily than amateurs, because you reach your peak potential very early on. For most professionals that I've come across in Wushu, they get to maybe their mid-20s or their late 20s, and then that's enough. They've achieved as much as they're going to achieve, and they've spent a large proportion of their life doing Wushu. So it's time to move on. It's time to get on with something else, career, relationships, and live the rest of your life. And that is absolutely perfect. That's fine. And that is how 99% of professional athletes go about their lives. So then for me, I'm obviously going to be talking from the experience of an amateur athlete, because I was only full-time for about 5 years. Before I left London, came back home to my hometown, and began a business, and then became an amateur athlete. And I've been an amateur athlete ever since. In fact, something which a lot of people find very hard to believe is that I've only ever trained with my coach, Mike, on Saturdays in Derby, once per week for the last 20 years. For the last 20 years, I have one session per week with my coach, and that is it. The same is true for my teammates as well, Sam Mack and Zach Ladkin. We only train with our coach once per week, and that's on Saturday for a few hours. Everything else we do training-wise is in the week by ourselves, predominantly conditioning and maybe Wushu basic training as well. But our actual training time with our coach, doing Wushu on the Wushu carpet once per week for a few hours for the last 20 years. I won't go into detail about the semantics of that. I mean, that's for another video. But suffice to say, I would probably even go as far to say that I'm not even an amateur athlete. By the book, I'm a recreational athlete. The fact that I only train with my coach once a week for a few hours, and for the majority of the time, I would probably train, anything from 2 to 5 times per week on my own, mostly conditioning or some other stuff in a gymnastics center or something like that. Certainly nothing like I used to when I was in my late teens, early 20s. And I think that really is what has enabled me to train and compete for so long. I haven't tried to blitz my Wushu career in 3, 4, or 5 years. I originally assumed I'd be retired by 30 years old, thinking that I would not be able to do Wushu after 30. But I massively proved myself wrong with that idea. I was 30 years old in 2011. And I did retire. I did actually retire for a short time because we had 2 very good Wushu athletes at the time. Sam Mack was just becoming a senior athlete at that time. And Richard Devine, a former UK Wushu athlete who spent most of his 20s training in Russia and became an incredibly good athlete. And sort of around 2010, 11, Sam and Richard really, in my opinion, were the future of senior Wushu moving forward. So after the European Championships in Turkey in 2010, I decided I'd call it a day. And I went to university and studied acting. Tragically, Richard had a serious accident, which then finished off his Wushu career, and he was out. Sam also, unfortunately, went to the Junior World Championships at 18 years old and ruptured his ACL. So at the time, we thought that was potentially Sam's Wushu career over and done with as well. Fortunately, Sam being Sam and my coach being my coach, they managed to find a way back through rehabilitation, through training, through that sheer determination to not give up, which is very, very respectable. But at that time, I was very concerned that we had very little in the way of future Great Britain Wushu. So I had a word with my coach, Mike, and I said, look, come back to training in 2012. Came back to training January 2012. 2012. I came back to training in 2012, just for fun, just to see how things would go. And I came back to the third set compulsories, which was quite nice. And literally within a year, I went back to competition, starting with some open European competitions. And then miraculously, I went to the 2014 European Championships and won gold, silver, bronze, which was incredible. But the difference between my 20s and my 30s is not that things were necessarily easier or better, but I had a whole new understanding of my body, of conditioning, diet, nutrition, and I paid a lot more attention to those things. I'd had years and years of Wushu experience, and it wasn't Wushu that changed, or it wasn't that I changed Wushu, it was that I changed everything else. I worked really hard on my diet and nutrition and my recovery and my conditioning. And that made all the difference. That completely transformed my Wushu and enabled me to win the European Championships, not just in 2014, but also in Russia in 2016 as well as hitting probably what I consider to be my peak Wushu in 2015 when I went to the World Championships in Indonesia. As I went through that phase, through my 30s, the importance of conditioning and diet and nutrition and recovery became even more prominent as each year ticked by. As I got older, things got harder. Recovery took longer. Injuries were easier to get and lasted longer. And it was getting harder to be able to do things like 540s and 720s and all that kind of stuff. So I had to make a decision on how much of those more difficult things that I was doing in my 20s I wanted to continue doing. And so I decided to sort of rein it in and be very realistic about what I could achieve safely. And I started thinking about the long term. I started thinking about what I wanted to do with Wushu. I was no longer individual competition focused, in that it wasn't a case of I want to win this gold medal, I want to win that gold medal, I want to be better than this athlete or the next athlete or whatever. I dropped all of that stuff when I got into my 30s, and Wushu, I started to approach Wushu from a point of view of fun and fulfillment, and trying to do a competition routine at the best I can do it on the day. Because you never know how you're going to wake up on the day. You might have a bad night's sleep, like I did in Latvia. I had an incredibly bad night's sleep the day before the competition. And that's the worst thing you ever want for a competition. But if that happens, you have to be able to deal with it. And you probably will not compete at the same level you know you can compete at. But therein lies the challenge. It's no good having this fixed challenge of I want to win that gold medal, because if you wake up on the day of the competition feeling ill or tired or whatever, even though that goal has stayed the same from the start of your training to now, you probably won't achieve that goal. Maybe you could on your best day, but what's the chance of you landing on your best day in competition? It's very, very much out of your hands, as much as you try and control those circumstances. So I decided that actually I want to be able to perform the best competition routine on the day of the competition I can, given whatever circumstances lead up to that, the days and the weeks leading up to it. Maybe you have an injury, like I've got an adductor injury right now. Maybe you overtrain and you've lost your enthusiasm. Maybe you have a poor night's sleep. Or maybe, just maybe, you are absolutely perfectly balanced and in the best physical and mental shape you can be. And you absolutely smash that routine on the day, and it's the best routine you've ever done in your whole life. That's a win. That is a win. But you still might not be good enough to win a gold medal or even 10th place at the World Championships. But it's still a win if that's the best that you could possibly do on the day. And that's the conclusion I came to. I started making those goals and those targets, and it actually worked so much better in my favor. It took the stress and the pressure off going to competition, trying to live up to a goal that I was trying to achieve that was fixed, that had an external and extrinsic meaning. I took my goals and made them intrinsic. And that really, really helped. That transformed my wushu as I got older. It's not always easy for younger athletes to behave like that. It takes quite a bit of maturity and experience to get to that point. And if you stay in a sport long enough, you probably will get to that point as well. And I hope that anybody that's watching this does manage to get to that point, because it is such a wonderful place to be as an athlete. Because you go there to compete for yourself, and you're competing against the circumstances that surround you rather than other athletes, you know. And it is just a great way to be a competitor. And that kind of really is how psychologically and emotionally I've managed to stay competing for so many years. Because I think the reason a lot of people quit or retire outside of lifestyle connotations is because they have this idea in their mind that if you're an athlete and you compete in a sport, the number one goal is to win. Well, we're all ready to win. We're all preconditioned to go to a competition and win a medal. Of course we are. But that is a very fixed goal, extrinsic goal, which you don't have direct control of achieving, because you don't know how good other athletes around the world are and how well they are going to compete against you on the day. That's out of your control. There's nothing that you can do about it. You might be the best you've ever been, and they still might be better. So how can you possibly win? You can't. And let's say you get to my age now and you're 42 years old and you have that mindset. The reason you would quit is because you're like, well, I'm 42. I can't do 540s or 720s anymore. I can't jump as high or move as fast as, you know, the professionals and the youngsters who are in their 20s. So I'm never going to win a gold medal at the World Championships. Well, that is why you would quit, because you are already beaten. You've beaten yourself by giving yourself that fixed target of it has to be, I have to win. I have to get a gold medal, or I have to get a 9.6 or a 9.7 or even a 9.2 or whatever. When you give yourself a fixed goal to achieve in Wushu, or any sport for that particular matter, as you get older, it becomes very, very difficult to realistically achieve those goals, especially when you are comparing yourself to people who are half your age. But if you drop that, if you get rid of that idea, if you flip the idea of goal setting from extrinsic to intrinsic, it changes the game altogether. You become focused on what you can achieve for yourself. You go to a competition, any competition, whether it's your local competition, the nationals, Open European Championships, World Championships, whatever. Doesn't matter who you're competing against at whatever level. You're going to step onto that carpet, you're going to do your performance, but you're doing it for you. And you will know if it's a win or not based on when you come off, could you have done that routine any better on that particular day in that given moment? Not could you have done that routine any better 3 weeks ago when you were training in your gym and everything was perfect and you were flying high on motivation. That's a different circumstance. That's a different moment in history. In that moment then, when you step on the competition carpet, whatever happens in that morning or the night before, could you possibly have done that routine any better? And if the answer is no, then despite whatever the score is or the placing, that's a win. And that's a win for you. And that for a lot of people is hard to get to. That's where I'm at, because I cannot realistically say to myself, Steve, your goal is to win gold medal at the World Championships at 42 years old. It's a bit of a pie in the sky goal, and to kid myself into thinking that I can achieve that would be very disingenuous. And because I know that, I probably wouldn't train very well. I'd put a lot of pressure on myself and probably end up just packing it in, to be fair. So longevity in sport, and longevity in Wushu particularly, primarily comes from where you set your goals, extrinsic or intrinsic, and then how you go about achieving them. A lot of people who have spoken to me about training and competing as you get older are more worried about the physical side of things, which is understandable. You know, things change as we get older. But because your goals should become intrinsic, they are no longer about hitting 720 this and 540 that, a particular score or whatever. So what you do is you make changes to the way you train, and therefore your competition choreography, your routine choreography, that suit your level of physicality to do with your age and lifestyle. Now, obviously, as you get older, you might already be married and have children and have a dog and a mortgage and a very busy career. And your lifestyle as a 30-year-old in your 30s, or maybe even if you're in your 40s, might be very, very hectic. And Wushu can only really give you 5 or 10% of your entire time. So you have to look at that and say, well, what can I realistically do with that amount of time? How can I compete at a high level with that amount of time available for Wushu? Well, if you've been doing Wushu for a long time, then the last thing you need to worry about are the fundamentals of Wushu. You don't need to be spending hours and hours and hours doing Jibengong and basics and stuff like that. Yes, you do need to train them, but you don't need to absolutely blitz them because you've done years and years of that already. You need to be very selective about what you need to train specifically for your competition routines. You also need to consider the most important factor of getting older, and that is injury prevention. Because the number one thing that will retire you from Wushu is injury, guaranteed. Guaranteed. And I'll tell you now, in your 30s and especially in your 40s, if you get injured, it can be weeks or months before you can get back to normal training. Because of that, you have to be very, very serious and very diligent about injury prevention training. Specifically for Wushu, ankles, knees, and lower back. Just like you would if you were becoming an old person and you were just trying to make sure that you stay mobile for the rest of your life. Wushu is one of the hardest high-impact sports on the body. And in order to continue to do that, you have to address the possibility that you're going to get injured. You have to reduce the chance of that happening. And to do that, you have to start doing prehab injury prevention training. I will do a video about that later in the future, but that has to be taken very, very seriously. The other thing really I would say is you have to pay a lot more attention to your diet and nutrition, your hydration and your recovery. It's not good enough now to cheat on your food all the time and just wing it and make excuses. Oh, I've got to eat this because my family's eating that, and it's my birthday every week, so I'm going to have whatever. Everything that can happen to your body negatively will happen at a greater rate of scale as you get older, So you have to therefore be even stricter than you were maybe in your early 30s or in your 20s. Having the McDonald's will make a difference, even if it's just one. Drinking soda drinks will definitely have a negative impact. Drinking alcohol at any time will have an effect. There's a lot of memes going about how when you're in your late 30s and in your 40s and beyond, how a night out will actually ruin you for weeks. How having one drink or a pint of beer or whatever has the same effect on you now as maybe 5 when you were younger. And they're jokes, but they are also very true. And if you're an athlete or you want to be an athlete, or continue to be an athlete, these things they carry a lot more negative impact on you as you get older. So you have to be really serious about sorting that out. You have to be stricter on your diet, nutrition, and recovery and conditioning, more stricter than when you was in your early 30s or in your 20s. It is even more of a professional athlete mindset now than it has ever been in your life previous. Not because you're trying to train professionally, but you need that level of discipline in order for your body to continue doing what you want to do. And there's no reason why you can't. You can definitely still compete at world level, at international level, realistically, good quality, clean routines, easily scoring in the mid-9s on the assumption that your routines are clean, into your 40s. There is no reason why you can't. Injury is the number one thing that will hold you back, and lifestyle. But if you can sort these two things out through conditioning and discipline, then there's no reason why you can't reach that age limit and beyond and carry on competing. But you just have to change variables. It's about moving across the field into different positions in order to achieve the same goal via a different method. You can't have the same mindset as you did when you was in your 20s or possibly even in your 30s. It takes determination. It takes a lot of self-discipline. It takes understanding and support from the people around you as well. Very important, that one, because as you do get into your 40s, there is this social, cultural expectation that your life as a youngster is over, that you now need to be settled down in a career with a wife or a partner, with children perhaps, and a dog, and that you are now starting the last half of your life, that you now need to become a grown-up. But there's nothing to say you can't do that and still be an athlete. It's just not very common and often frowned upon by friends and family. So you do need the support and understanding of people around you. Convincing them of that is also quite tricky. I can't really give you advice on that because it's a very individual thing. That's something that you have to go about your own way. For me, because I've always been an athlete, nothing changes in that respect. But I have had to explain to people that this is who I am, this is my identity, this is how I see myself. And for as long as I'm physically capable of and emotionally enthused to continue doing, I will continue to be an athlete, whether that's at world championship level or even just at national level. I will always train and I will always compete because that's who I am. That's what makes me who I am. And without being disrespectful or offensive to any of my friends or family or anybody that knows me, that's how I say it to people. You know, that's me. That's who I am. And if you disagree, then I'm sorry that your expectations are different. But that's who I am and that's what I do. And there are other things that I do in my life, a lot of other things that I do in my life that have nothing to do with Wushu, that are considered very grown up and of my age. But the one thing that probably isn't is being an athlete, training and competing in a sport that is really designed more for younger people. And that's it, that's where I leave it. And friends and family can take it or leave it. But that's basically how I managed to continue to train and compete now at 42 years old and have done, you know, for the last decade or so. I hope that some of that information is useful or helpful or motivating, at least, for some of you older athletes who are in your 30s or maybe already into your 40s. It is definitely possible for you to do it, but there are certain factors that you need to address if that's the route you're going down. So good luck to anybody that is doing that. It's less about luck and more about just being clever about it. If you've got any questions, ask me in the comments. I will do my best to answer them as best I can. By all means, if any of my friends on there who have got my direct contact details, feel free to email me or message me and we can have a chat about it as well. But yeah, if that's what you want to do, then go for it. There's absolutely no reason why you can't. I'll catch you again soon, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps. I am trying to grow this YouTube channel. It's going to take a bit of time, but all your support really does help. So I'll catch you again in the next one. Cheers, guys. Bye for now.